Joe pulled together one of the highest paid screenplays of the early 90s, one of the hottest directors going at the time, some of the biggest stars imaginable, and one of the most mega producers in the industry. Not only do you get a major piece of personality conflicts and ego clashes, but a pretty good film as well. Let's get into it with Bruce Willis and Damon Wayans in The Last Boy Scout. As pro football star Billy Cole is pushed to his breaking point and unleashes gunfire on the gridiron, he ultimately ends his own life, further complicating an ongoing seedy conspiracy. Meanwhile, down-and-out private detective Joe Hallenbeck is on a further decline when he discovers his best friend Mike Matthews is sleeping with his wife, minutes before he's killed in a car explosion. Regardless, Joe follows through on a job that Mike gave him, involving an exotic dancer named Corey, who is hooked up with disgraced ex-footballer Jimmy Dix. Gambling and mounting drug problems got him excised from the game, and even he can't remain faithful to the lady he loves. Thus, Dix and Hallenbeck are straight at odds, as Joe gives him all attitude and no answers as to what's going on. Ultimately, in waiting for Corey outside the club, Joe is jumped by thugs, and Corey is gunned down on the street in front of Jimmy. The reasons as to why force Hallenbeck and Dix to start digging for evidence and answers. Yet the closer they get to unraveling a mystery of corruption and political bribery to legalize sports gambling, the more dire risks they find themselves in. After Joe finds Jimmy using cocaine in his home to deal with his physical and emotional pain, Joe kicks him out, seemingly severing their partnership. Mixed into this is Joe's combative daughter Darian, who seems to hate his guts, but soon defiantly hitches along with Jimmy when her father goes missing. Joe is abducted by the dangerous yet sophisticated henchman Milo to set him up for the assassination of a United States Senator, the same one who got Joe fired from the Secret Service for standing up to him and doing the right thing. All this comes from LA Stallions owner Shelly Marcone, purely out of greed, believing there are no more heroes left in the sport. But he'll soon find out that these two seemingly washed-up has-beens have a little bit of heroism left in them. So arriving to U.S. cinemas on December 13th, 1991, grossing $114.5 million off a $43 million budget, is The Last Boy Scout. Written by Shane Black, directed by Tony Scott, starring Bruce Willis, and produced by Joel Silver, who are all people who are like just massively successful people at this point in time. Like Shane Black, of course, wrote the original screenplay for Lethal Weapon, which again spawns a franchise, major blockbuster hit. Tony Scott's been working with Jerry Bruckheimer, Don Simpson on Top Gun, Beverly Hills Cop 2, and Days of Thunder, which are all blockbuster successes. Bruce Willis, again, one of the biggest stars around at the time, hot off of Moonlighting and Die Hard and Die Hard 2. But also a star is like he's trying to almost kind of step a little bit away from just being the action star. But this couple of films he's kind of doing in between like Die Hard and Die Hard 2 and a little bit up to this film is like don't really entirely kind of work very well. It's like he does Bonfire of the Vanities and he does Hudson Hawk, where just like critically panned, not commercially successful stuff. But he's still linked in with Joel Silver here because Joel Silver also produced Hudson Hawk and the Die Hard films, as well as some of the biggest blockbusters like the last decade or so. Like he produced a lot of Walter Hill films such as The Warriors, 48 Hours, and Streets of Fire. Goes off to do producing on like Weird Science and Commando and Predator and Lethal Weapon and Die Hard and Action Jackson, Roadhouse. The guy's a mega producer. Blockbuster after blockbuster after blockbuster. And he's also one of the biggest egos at the time, and probably still is a little bit. He's always been known in a certain way as being like very aggressive and forceful, which is something a producer kind of has to be, but I'm sure when you have someone like Tony Scott who's worked very, very comfortably with Bruckheimer and Simpson, and continue to do so after this, which a lot of other films, a lot of great films, it's a bit of a different shift in a certain way, and you get a lot of things in this whole thing where, like, again, These are all guys at the massive success they possibly could have, like the peak. These are the hottest these guys have ever been. And of course, they're all going to kind of want to flex a little bit. They're all kind of like coming in here as like the biggest thing possible in their fields. And so they're all going to have a little bit of a clash. Not everyone's going to completely gel in a certain way. And all this starts with the selling of Shane Black's screenplay, which sold for $1.75 million. $1.75 million. At the time it was sold, it was the highest paid screenplay of all time, up until about 2 months later when the Basic Instinct script got sold and went well overboard on that regard. But it was such a massive thing. I mean, just like the whole thing was, Shane Black started writing this a couple of years beforehand. And it was the whole thing where like he kind of like was on the outs. He kind of just been dumped and whatnot. Just like the first big love of his entire life just leaves him. And so he's kind of like the character Bruce Willis portrays in the film as Joe Hallenbeck. He's down and out. He's smoking cigarettes. He's just not in the best spirits or anything like that. He's in a really downtrodden regard. So he kind of goes through writing the screenplay in a very therapeutic sensibility to kind of expel all those feelings. A lot of that relationship between Hallenbeck and his wife in the entire film is probably kind of that catharsis, that kind of like output of all those sort of emotions he was dealing with at the time. So you got all this stuff. He's going through this very interesting sort of noirish type of film that goes into a much bigger action thing as it goes along in the entire mystery and the unraveling of plot points. And it gets sold for this major thing to the David Geffen Company, which is owned by Warner Brothers. And so it's such a major thing. It's like, okay, Lethal Weapon's huge. Lethal Weapon is undeniably huge, despite the fact that Richard Donner comes in and brings in screenwriter Jeffrey Boam to kind of lighten up the tone of the screenplay. So a lot of the funner elements about Lethal Weapon are much more what Donner kind of imposed on the screenplay to make it a little bit more of a fun type of thing instead of heavy and bleak. So a lot of that stuff was Richard Donner's touch getting the whole thing going. But it had the basis of Shane Black's smart screenplay, his smart dialogue, his way of characterizing certain things, and just moving a very smart idea along throughout the entire plot of the whole thing. So still start with his basis, and obviously tied in with Joel Silver. He gets this entire thing sold and kind of tied into everything and get moving forward on this whole entire thing. And of course, getting Tony Scott at the time to direct an action movie is just like the smartest thing you could possibly do. If you're not getting like John McTiernan, then Tony Scott's like the next big guy. He's the next big guy making the big blockbuster action films. And he's just one of the best in the field. He continued to be one of the best in the field. Still making great films like Crimson Tide and Enemy of the State and Men on Fire after this. Great films. Really great films. And so it's like the whole thing is like he's just on that wavelength. And of course, Joel Silver getting Bruce and the whole thing is like, okay, Hudson Hawk didn't quite work out for us, but we got this thing that can really just get it back up on the track. Keep the star power back on the level here and keep going forward and being buddy-buddy with that. And just like everything seemed to kind of fit in certain cogs that seemed logical to get everything in the right place. But the interesting thing is that there's so many things altered from Shane Black's screenplay. Where I guess him and Tony Scott years later kind of reflected on things like the original screenplay was better than the film that we got because apparently like Bruce Willis and Joel Silver kind of imposed certain changes on the entire thing as they go along. It's like there's a lot more of a focus. I guess maybe like the wife was much more in peril, much more forefront. And was like, I just made 2 Die Hard films where I'm trying to save my wife and all that type of stuff. I don't want to do that again. So let's minimize the wife and do something a little bit more focused on other elements. So they start changing things here, and then change things here. And a lot of the stuff in Black's original screenplay was like, again, a little bit like the Lethal Weapon original screenplay. It's a little heavier. It's a little bleaker. It's a little bit nastier in places. It's a little darker overall. There's like a darker tone to a lot of things that Tony Scott's not averted to. Like when you start watching like True Romance, that thing's it's got plenty of darkness and it's got plenty of graphic violence, like really bleak stuff in it. But it has a lot of great snappy things because, again, that was a Tarantino screenplay, so he still has a transition to a really good screenwriter in that film that also has those certain sensibilities of having maybe some darkness or some witty, wry humor and stuff like that, but is not afraid of the graphicness, the goriness, the violence, and stuff like that. So he's got these wavelengths and whatnot. So it's like things still seem like they'd fit, and all these different things. So it's like it feels like Shane Black's sensibilities and Tony Scott's could really mesh very well. But as things go along in the entire production, things aren't quite gelling with certain people. It's like, apparently, Bruce Willis and Damon Wayans were not having anything of either one of each other. Like, apparently there was a rift there. There's like, these guys don't like each other, which is extremely difficult to really kind of perceive because they got such amazing chemistry in this entire film. They're so good bouncing things off. You could never tell that these guys had any problem whatsoever between themselves on set. But apparently, like, Tony Scott didn't like Joel Silver. And a lot of people like Taylor Negron in the entire film said sort of things like, Joel Silver is always like a force of nature type of guy. If like there's any simple little thing going wrong, the guy just wants to throw everyone out of the entire way and just take over the entire goddamn thing and just drive the entire bus in an entirely different direction. It's like he's just this major powerhouse type of thing in terms of personality and what he does as a producer to push everything forward very aggressively. And it's not the only production that's been set on. It's kind of his regular way of dealing with things, and some filmmakers just don't quite gel with his approach on certain things. Apparently Tony Scott, he never worked with him ever again after this. So like it kind of tells that he kind of just, after like True Romance, he goes back with Bruckheimer and stuff like that and does plenty of other films with him, has a nice working relationship over there. Silver, he just had no time for him. He didn't like how he did business, how he handled things on set, or even did all the changes of the screenplay, or how they dealt with things in post-production. There was such a conflict and such a mess from everything, from one step of things to another, from moving the screenplay along to dealing with people on set to getting into post-production, where the entire film was perceived as a giant mess, where they had 3 different credited editors. And apparently, according to one of the editors, they had a bunch of other editors that took a crack at editing the film that they did not get credit for. The thing turned into a goddamn disaster zone of a lot of different things. There left a lot of people bitter about the entire production. And a lot of people want to talk about this. Like, there's been interviews, like articles, stuff like that, but you go on YouTube, you cannot find an Entertainment Tonight segment on this thing. You can't find an electronic press kit of anything. Nothing. No one wanted to talk about this thing once it got released. They just left it and walked away. Didn't promote it very well because the film was a bit of a disappointment. 114 million is like, it's not bad, but it's like when you're thinking like the Die Hard numbers, you're thinking like big. You're thinking like, again, Tony Scott numbers. You're thinking like maybe 200 million at least. They're thinking like big blockbuster, big stuff. It's like, he ekes out a profit, perfectly fine. It's a little over double the budget, everything like that, but I'm sure they were looking for bigger numbers and bigger things and much better reviews of the thing at the time. It just didn't hit off very well. And of course, like, again, it's like this noirish action film getting released right before Christmas is just kind of an odd type of feel in a certain way. It's a R-rated film that Fox kind of did the weird type of thing the year before with Predator 2, again, another Joel Silver produced film, where it got released right around Christmas as this bloody, violent action film, and it didn't do as well as they wanted to. It didn't hit the numbers, so I was like, I don't know why that kept being the certain thing where you release these hard R action films around this sort of era of the year or whatnot. It's very strange. It's a very strange approach to your release schedule. You could probably put it out maybe a little earlier if you wanted to put it out a little later than that to kind of like get it into a bit of a better time. But it's such a weird type of thing, how that goes about, how you release it, and just like it just doesn't go over well. But it's like, you get all these problems, like, you can't really tell the problems are there in the film. You really can't. I watched this film, and I've watched this film for years, like, over 20 years now. I've watched this film plenty of times. I never had an inkling that there was any kind of, like, disaster zone behind the scenes, that things felt like the thing was clunky or fell apart, or there was, like, certain things that just didn't feel like they worked. The film's always worked. And I don't know how that kind of comes together when everyone is just kind of at their throats. Like, Shane Black and Tony Scott don't have problems, but Tony Scott and Joel Silver have problems, but Joel Silver and Shane Black don't have problems because they're still friends to this day. Joel Silver produced Kiss Kiss Bang Bang and The Nice Guys for Shane Black, so they have no problems. But, like, Willis and Damon are having problems, and Tony Scott's probably having problems with some of the cast. everything's kind of going off the wall. And even composer Michael Kamen steps on this thing, who'd done Lethal Weapon films and Die Hard films and stuff like that, and didn't really like the film, but it kind of like did it. It was like, okay, I'll do it because Bruce asked me to, or something like that. So like he kind of comes in and is like, he doesn't really like the film. He's not super enthusiastic about the whole thing, but he still does a good job with it. But such a thing is like, how can so many things go wrong and still turn out a good movie? That's baffling to me in a certain way. The film is such an interesting thing because you got the Tony Scott style is all over this film. It looks absolutely wonderful. Shot by his regular cinematographer, Ward Russell, who went on to shoot many other films, ended up shooting the X-Files, Fight the Future film later on. The film looks fantastic. Tony Scott films looked absolutely gorgeous. He just knew how to photograph everything to make it look so slick. He always had this wonderful sort of on-the-cusp sort of marketing eye to everything. Had this slick MTV style in a certain way that still conveyed such great images that told stories and elicited emotions. All these different things that still energized the film with emotion and action and excitement, all that type of stuff. He always knew how to make it look so good, and still it fits so well with that noir tone that Shane Black always kind of goes back to every so often. He kind of has that sort of staple in his writing that fits with this visual style that Tony Scott loves to employ. It's one of these things like the film just has that great smoky haze and ambiance that you have going on with the high contrast visuals. Like, Tony Scott's not afraid to kind of like backlit people in a certain serious dramatic scene because it works for the atmosphere of the entire thing. It works so much because it looks wonderful. It just has such a great style to it in the action sequences where he knows how to use the slow motion stuff and never quite cut too fast. Everything comes off very, very well when you have the car chase near the end of the film. There's a lot of tight shots here and whatnot, but you're not losing the sensibility of what's happening to whom, who's doing what, and the geography of different cars with one another. It's like everything still comes off very, very well. He knows that sort of sensibility, how to capture the action where it's not going to lose the audience at certain points of time. How he photographs everything in the entire film just looks fantastic. And the entire film, with his direction, does have that visceral, kind of gritty quality to a certain degree, with still this shade of bleakness to everything. Because you got all these sort of good characters, these good people like Hallenbeck and Dix. They're good people underneath, but they've been so damaged with all this sort of emotional scar tissue over top of them that you kind of have to peel it away as the film goes along. Find the deeper quality of the characters inside of them on top of all the shit that's been piled up on top of them all, after all these years and all that type of stuff. It's a very interesting type of thing to see how the crass humor, the cynical sensibility of the entire film kind of brings out certain different qualities that I think are still very much in line for a Tony Scott film or a Shane Black screenplay. It still holds up very well in that regard in a lot of different places to have a very interesting, again, noirish type of story going on in this whole thing, where again it's like hard-boiled detective. All these different things that kind of going through this thing where it's like, it's very much an anti-hero, Joe Hallenbeck. He's not the sort of regular protagonist, not even John McClane. He's definitely a hero. He's a wisecracking asshole, but Hallenbeck is a much different type of thing. On the surface, it might seem similar, but I think there's certain different layers to this character that definitely makes it stand out so well under Bruce Willis's fantastic performance here. Just like, he's this good guy where everything just went to shit after he tried to do the right thing. And I think that's such an interesting thing to write for a character, to see them at their lowest point, despite the fact that they're a good person underneath. They didn't deserve to have what happened to them actually happen to them. So it's like he's a Secret Service guy. He ends up taking bullets for the president, where they had a very good stand-in for Jimmy Carter, I'll say that. But then he ends up working with this senator who's beating these hookers and stuff like that. He's a real piece of shit. And he tries to stand up, and it's like, this is wrong, and goes in there and punches him in the face and knocks his teeth out. And that's where his entire life just goes down the drain. His marriage goes in the shitter. His kid doesn't respect her anymore. He's now this burned-out loser who's working as a private detective, who his best friend is screwing his wife. It's like, it's perfect hard-boiled detective stuff. Perfect noir stuff. Strip everything away, make him the bare bones of the man he could possibly be, and grind him under the heel of something. And it's a good way to see how a character can progress and have that arc. I think, one, Bruce is hilarious in the entire film. The dialogue he's given from Shane Black and all this other stuff, it's great. It's great. Hilarious. It's just like everything he hits off with every retort, every sly remark, every little snarky piece of dialogue he gets out. It's like, it's perfect. It's perfect. It's just right on the pulse of what the hell you need to have for a character like this, who's both down and out, but also it's like he's not really going to take as much shit from people as they think he's going to take. And again, he's got a guy who doesn't have a whole hell of a lot left to lose. So when even after the whole thing, when it's like he's waiting out the club for Corey and whatnot, and then the guys jump him, and he's got the big pimp motherfucker with the freaking hat with a Desert Eagle on him, and he's still cracking wise at him and telling your mama jokes at him. It's like, it's just fucking great. It's great humor for a great character that feels absolutely perfect for Bruce Willis to inhabit at this point in time. He's so good in this role that I think it goes a little bit underlooked, as the whole film kind of does. He's very just perfect in this entire role, where he's got that stuff where he's been beaten down and things are in a mess, and it's like he just has to keep crawling himself back up after he's getting punched out by everything. He's the punching bag of everything. For his wife, for his kid, for every friggin' henchman in Los Angeles. Every little thing in life just keeps knocking him down and grinding him down and all these different things. But he still keeps getting up and going forward and kind of telling people to fuck off in regards to it. It's like, it's a really good character that Bruce brings a lot of different qualities to. I think are just perfect. He's perfect in the role. I don't think anyone else could hit it quite as well as he does, with the cynicism, with the wit, all these little things, but still having those great little moments. It was like, don't know if I'm getting divorced because above all this other stuff, goddamn, I still love my wife. Despite all this shit, he still loves his wife. He still loves his daughter. You had that little moment there before Milo comes and tases him. He's got that moment right over them when they're sleeping in the beds. Like, it still shows the heart of the character. You don't lose sight of that. That is still a core element to still make him relatable, still make him likable in a certain way. Even though he's this crusty, curmudgeon-y asshole, he's a jerk, so many ways. Where, again, I think there were test screening audiences where, like, they didn't react so well to it, and some of the executives at Warner Brothers and stuff like that were kind of like, we don't know how well this is going to come play off with certain audiences, stuff like that, with that type of character. They still maintained that, and Bruce was still there making those moments count for a lot of different things in the film, to have that arc of the character going towards the end of the film where things kind of take a turn and things kind of weave back in, where, like, the shit kind of gets stripped away and they get back to the core of the relationship. They kind of get past all the other shit that's gone down in the entire film. So it's like, I like that quality, and still maintains a heart with the character of Joe Hallen back here. I think it is one of Bruce Willis's best roles. When you look at a lot of other stuff, like, he's done great stuff with drama and the comedy stuff and all these thrillers and stuff like that, but it's kind of an interesting role that I think just goes a little bit overlooked, and kind of like, he's so good in it. He's so on point, and Shane Black's screenplay just gives him a lot of stuff to go with. Despite anything else that might have been going on where they kept changing certain things on the screenplay, he still hit it off very, very well on such a good character here that, again, works so well against Damon Wayans, where, again, I can't for life see that there was conflicts between these two guys, because they're so damn on point. The chemistry, the rapport, all the stuff hitting back and forth, they're right on the money. And I like so much that, again, Damon Wayans, he's a funny actor. If you saw him in Living Color, he was fabulous on the entire thing. And, of course, he had some things later on when he was on the Lethal Weapon show, and I guess he had a little bit of an ego, and that kind of tanked the show eventually, and all these different things. But at this point in time, he's really goddamn good, and he's got a lot of rising star power going into this whole thing, and he's really good in it. It's like, again, he's got swagger, he's got charisma, he's got the comedic timing, all that stuff. But the moments where he actually gets to be a dramatic actor, when he's talking about the entire thing that happened with his wife and his kid who lived for 17 minutes inside of an incubation tank, while he's off having the game of his life down in Tampa or whatnot. It's an amazing scene. And again, right after that, the entire thing where Joe catches him doing the cocaine in the bathroom and he punches him out and he's just talking about like how freaking life just kind of ripped everything away and all these different things, and I gotta be crunching coating with my pancakes because the pain on my knees is so agonizing. It's fantastic. He's an excellent actor in these moments. He pulls those dramatic moments out with all the way that Tony Scott pulls out all these moments. Whenever he gets that chance to have that sort of moment to direct those scenes, he always nails it with the actors that he's given. He always pulls those moments out. It's like Damon had been kind of like, almost like, not saying untested, but like a lot of people just didn't know the potential of what he could bring to the screen at this point. And like he showed so much of that potential right here with this character. It's like all the stuff, like he lost his wife and his kid a couple of years ago, and then he gets in with Corey, but then he loses his job. He's no longer the pro football star because he got into gambling and had these vices. And then the woman that he loves now gets slaughtered right in front of him, and it's like he couldn't be any lower. It's like that's such a great thing to have these characters just beaten down so much. See them kind of again crawl themselves back up to a certain point where they kind of overcome the odds. Like it's such a great way to write characters like this in a story like this. Take them from the ground with the lowest point possible and have them kind of build themselves back up and overcome those odds and have them get the shit beat out of them time and time again. It's great. Even the cops are not even like buying their stories and stuff like that. So it's like they can't go with the cops. They got all these henchmen with all these guns all over the place. They're all fucking things up and attacking them and punching them out and all these different things. It's fabulous. Seeing these characters of Hallenbeck and Jimmy Dix face against all these odds and all these different things, it's great type of stuff to have. Again, that comedic rapport between them. They're just absolutely sharp and perfect. All these different things. It's great witty rapport and some points where it's like Jimmy's not quite seasoned in this type of stuff, so he's a little stunted in some places, like coming up with the best retorts and stuff like that, and not having the best strategies to go about certain things. Where like even Darian, Joe Hallenbeck's kid, is kind of smarter at the investigation part of things than he is. It's kind of funny. And all these wonderful things, and of course, like into Danielle Harris. She's incredible. She already perfectly established herself in Halloween 4 and 5. And she did like Marked for Death for a little stint in Marked for Death with Seagal and stuff like that. But getting this entire thing, she's fantastic. Just like the fact that she was probably like, I don't know, 13 years old at this point in time, and she's incredibly good. That anyone she gets put in a scene with, she's up the tempo with them. She's on their level. She's hitting back and forth in that first scene with Bruce Willis, and they're just the fact that she's the character of Darian so foul-mouthed, and she doesn't seem like she has a hesitation against it, or she's kind of embarrassed by the dialogue or anything. She's like full bore into it, understanding the character inside and out, understanding that the contempt of the character. She's the poisonous, toxic type of thing between her parents. It's kind of jaded her. Like, it's wonderful seeing that little flashback scene. Like, after Joe's kind of done the thing where he saved the president, now he's in the hospital, and that one little shot of the young Darian with a little picture that she drew and everything like that. It's like, at one point she adored her father. But once everything went to shit, it all went to shit. And her opinion of him just went in the toilet. Her mother just hates him and just talks shit about him all the time. It's just a very interesting type of thing that she understood so much the ins and outs of what this character was and how to pivot the performance at certain points in time where it's like, yeah, first she's bitchy and she's just jaded and so unlikable, but as she gets teamed up with Jimmy there, she gets a little bit more fun, she gets a little more funny, she's a little bit more endearing. But then you get the whole thing where she ends up having the gun inside the sock puppet and stuff like that. The moment that she has there when she's walking up to her father, and she's got that sympathetic and just like that, she's scared. She's scared for her own father, and she still loves her father. Despite all this other bullshit, there's still that whole thing. It's like she still cares about him. And she wants to go in there and do what she can to save them from getting blown the fuck away. that look in her eyes, she shows so much talent. She was so goddamn good. She's still great today. But just like seeing her so young and so absolutely exceedingly talented is so damn good. Just like that, again, the comedic rapport and all this type of stuff. She's absolutely perfectly cast. And she hits up every moment without a goddamn flaw. I just absolutely love her in this entire film. Hitting it right out of the goddamn park. Another guy hitting it out of the goddamn park is Taylor Negron. This guy is phenomenal. I loved Taylor Negron. He was a wonderful actor. Always putting in such smart performances. I also know him so much from this film, playing Milo, this wonderful henchman. But I also remember him from this little indie comedy that came out a couple years later called The Stoned Age, where he plays this sort of disco liquor store clerk or whatnot, but he's got this one scene in the film, but it's like, he so owns it, so makes it stand out so well in that entire film, and he does the exact same thing here. Given a character with a lot of interesting quirks to him that had a lot more in Black's original screenplay. He was a much darker character. Like, his character was so sick and perverted, he was making snuff films. He was like super bleak type of character. It would have been even more scary and dangerous in that version, but what we ended up getting here is still a goddamn, just a delight. He's supremely memorable in his entire film. Just Milo, every time I come across someone who's named Joe, I always run around in my head of Joseph. Because he calls everyone by their full proper names. Well, it's not Jimmy, it's James. All these different things. It's not Billy Cole, it's William. It's such an interesting little quirk for the character to make him memorable, but he has such a great balance between like sophistication, just like nasty son of a bitch. He's got this quality, it's like he has no problem being so casual, just being such a evil son of a bitch. Just doing these grisly murders and all these different things, but I like the candor of the character so much. He wants to be so proper in a certain way, but he'll just fucking murder someone without a goddamn flinch. It's like such a great character. Just Shane Black would be the only guy I could possibly imagine writing this character quite so well, even though it doesn't match up entirely what he originally planned for the character, which again would have gone off in such a radical directions in a certain way and made such a seedier, sleazier film in a certain way. It still comes off very well through Taylor Negron's talent here because the guy was so good. So goddamn good in this whole thing. And of course, you get Noble Willingham here, who's playing Shelley Marcone, the kind of guy who is kind of dealing with all this gambling, corruption type of stuff, and he's at the head of this whole thing, and man, he's so good just playing a real sleazy, bravado-throwing bastard. Just like just the entire scene where they've got Darian there, and he's kind of giving the entire bad guy speech in a certain way, but he's just so much of a fucking cutthroat son of a bitch. Just shooting Jimmy in the hand out of no fucking provocation whatsoever. Just like all these little things, just like they're nasty fucking bad guys. And that just works so well with just like how much you'd really have to put up against these type of protagonists in the entire film. And of course you've got Halle Berry here portraying Corey in a very sweet, but also of course very sexy performance here, but like so much like, yeah, she does her exotic dance in the film, but they don't really exploit her in that regard. She's very much focused on being this very bright beacon of sorts in Jimmy's life, where even he can't remain faithful to her. It's like he's had all these vices, all the stuff happening in his background, that he becomes this wonderful, sweet, endearing, this beautiful woman that wants to do so many things for him that she'll go through extortion and blackmail against guys high up in the NFL to kind of just get him his job back, get him back where he needs to be to make him happy again. And so she puts herself in such a dangerous situation where she gets entangled with Mike Matthews and gets him killed and gets involved with Hallenbeck, and all these things go up in the entire film where it's like she does such a great job making such a strong impression with just a couple of scenes in the film, but a woman who does have a certain independency about herself that she kind of brushes up against Hallenbeck and is like, oh, you're going to be screaming, play that funky music, white boy, and stuff like that. It's like all these little things. She just adds so much charm to the character and such an intelligence as well. Just like all these different qualities bring so much more into the film to stir the pot of all the emotional qualities Jimmy has to go through It all centralizes around her character, what she's doing, and she does a great job adding that quality into the entire film. And of course, you got some really fantastic supporting cast where, like, Chelsea Field as Sarah Hallenbeck, where she's like, both kind of reviled, but also sympathetic at the same time. It's like, okay, you cheated on your husband with his best friend, but you kind of like understand why that happened. But it's like, okay, all these different things kind of like complicate the situation so much, but you still see so much of what the depth of their character is as the film goes along towards the end of it. She shows a lot of quality in this whole thing. Of course, love Bruce McGill. Guy's a brilliant actor. It's like, a lot of times he just gets just kind of like a regular supporting role, like this whole thing with Mike Matthews or whatnot, where he's like, again, cheating, fucking around with Hallenbeck's wife and all that type of stuff. But, man, I love him every time I see him in anything. He's so goddamn good on everything he does. And just everyone involved in the entire film is like, you get like Billy Blanks, who ends up inventing Tybo later on as Billy Gold beginning the film, which is like they do such a great thing with his look in the entire opening of the film. Like, he looks fucking haunted. Every shot they cut to on him is like, it looks so good because he looks like he's got the weight of the goddamn world on himself and it's about to crush him. And it's like, he does a really good job hitting that off. It's like everyone top to bottom, inside and out, everyone's playing the cops and even the henchmen. It's like the kind of vocabulary-laden guy that they have when they go up to the trunk of Hallenbeck's car and they have the C4 in it. Just a real smart type of thing. Just adding certain traits to the henchmen where they kind of stand out a little bit memorable. They don't just blend into the entire thing. Have them stand out with how the guy performs the role and all the different things they add to the thing to have certain repartee and stuff like that. So it's like, again, really sharp dialogue is the Shane Black staple. So it's like, he hit it off very well with getting very good characters in the entire thing and having everyone come into the film and have them with a lot of knowing depth and nuance, stuff like that. It's like, I think there's a lot of good quality in how they cast it, how they put the characters together. And I mentioned Michael Kamen before as the composer who came onto this film, where didn't respond quite so well to the entire thing, but still went ahead with it and still created a very good score to this whole thing that has some nice noir touches here and there and stuff like that, but I didn't feel like they pushed his score quite as well in the mix of the film. It was like, there's certain points like, I had to listen pretty close to what he was trying to do in these scenes to really get it out of it, where I heard some really good stuff. I just don't think they really kind of favored his score over like the sound effects and stuff like that and the whole thing. But it did put together a very good type of thing here, where there's like a little 4-note Die Hard motif that kind of comes up here and there. So he's still kind of playing in some of the similar type of things he had been doing at the time, but still did a really good job of the entire score. It did get released in 2015 by La La Land Records, but it being now 7 years later, it's very much unavailable at this point in time and out of print. But he still put together a good thing and still maintained a very fantastic, unique legacy across film altogether, especially in the action genre. But he always enjoyed kind of flexing his talent across wide spectrums of different tones and genres and whatnot. Always one of the best composers. And it is very interesting, the sort of changing complexion of this entire production and the story itself, because apparently the entire second half of the film was completely changed. Like, everything you see at the end of the film is like completely rewritten, because they originally had like, there were like shootouts in like Joe Hallenbeck's house. There was something that was supposed to happen between like Milo and Joe back at his offices. There was supposed to be like entire like helicopter speedboat chase as like the climax. There was nothing going to happen at a football stadium. All that never happened in the original screenplay. And apparently, like, Sarah gets abducted by Milo, and he was going to put her in like one of his snuff films with like a chainsaw or some shit. It was going to get real fucking crazy. Again, Bruce, like, I don't really want to deal with this sort of wife in peril stuff. Let's gonna push that off to the side there. So they changed that. And apparently the entire backstory was Senator Baynard, whereas like, it wasn't like Joe standing up for like him beating up a fucking hooker. It was like Senator's son got into like some kind of like manslaughter situation, and they were trying to cover it up, but Joe wouldn't have any of it. And they kind of like framed him like a kilo of cocaine in his house. It was very much a different type of thing. It's like, it was like just seedier, sleazier type of stuff going on in that screenplay. To kind of like alter that make the entire second half of the film just feel almost higher stakes, a lot darker, a lot more serious, a lot heavier in a lot of places. Like, it was just going to get really fucking intense. And maybe they just felt like that wasn't as commercial. I could definitely see, like, Joel Silver saying, oh, yeah, we paid almost $2 million for the screenplay, but let's throw half of that money out because the other half of the film is getting a little too far off the edge of where we kind of feel comfortable for it. So it's like none of this stuff gets shot. But there's a whole bunch of stuff that does get shot, where it's like Tony Scott would shoot so much coverage that like some of the editors they had in here really didn't know what the hell to do with it to find the scenes. And so they had one editor on here. Then they get Mark Goldblatt, who was one of the best editors around there. He'd worked with James Cameron before. And he started doing things, but it didn't quite work out until they got Stuart Baird in the whole thing, who had, again, he's a Richard Donner regular. He actually went in and also fixed up Tango and Cash for them, which also was another production. Also had a ton of problems where I think they fired the director at one point in time. That was a goddamn mess for another day's video or whatnot. But he came in there and fixed that up. And apparently, like, this happened apparently a lot of times with Warner Brothers around this time. Kind of like realizing, yeah, Tango and Cash, Showdown in Little Tokyo. Apparently, like, Demolition Man also had problems on that. It was like, there's a lot of Warner Brothers films, like, you know, like Out for Justice. Like, there's a lot of, like, Warner Brothers films, specifically action films at this point in time, that had a lot of these same problems. Where it's like they went in there and it's like they had to fumble around and editing over and over again to kind of like restructure things and figure things out. Like, I don't know if it was a problem with Warner Brothers and not the films. Again, how this thing became such... You perceive it as a train wreck after you're hearing all this behind-the-scenes stuff. All the personalities not working with one another. They're all combative and things going off in different directions. You change half the screenplay after you pay $1.75 million for the goddamn thing, more than any other screenplay had been paid for at that time. It's like, what is anyone thinking? What is anyone thinking? You pay an enormous amount of sum for this thing, and you throw half the goddamn thing out, rewrite the whole damn thing, and then everyone butts heads during production trying to figure out what the hell to do because no one wants to get along with one another, and then the entire thing gets blown up in post-production, and no one's happy with it. No one wants to really go back and discuss it. It's like we're probably never getting like special edition, collector's edition Blu-ray on this whole thing, because even though like the thing is like, okay, Tony Scott's gone, and Bruce Willis is now retired with his aphasia, so he probably wouldn't be talking about stuff that happened 30 years ago. And maybe Shane Black's come out and talked a couple of times. There's been like an assistant director came out and talked about things, but I don't think you're getting a whole lot from Joel Silver from the whole thing, or obviously Michael Kamen's past as well, and Damon Wayans really isn't talking about that stuff, you know, especially after his blow up on the Lethal Weapon TV series, which didn't go over well with anyone. It's a big mess. But it doesn't look like a mess. That's the thing is like, The Last Boy Scout, you sit down and watch it like, it feels like any other action film at the time. There's not like gaping plot holes or some parts of the film like you felt like you threw out entire subplots of certain characters, you edited stuff out. It's still a streamlined film. It's still as well directed as any other Tony Scott film. It's still as well written as any other Shane Black film. As well as acted as any other film that came out at the time in the genre. It's like, how did everything go wrong and still come out right? Even though, again, the bitterness on set and all those memories kind of taint how anyone would look at it, especially Shane Black. Like, I wrote this screenplay, and now this is the film we got, which is not the film that we really wanted to make. And it's like the original screenplay, I feel, was a lot better than what we got. So you can definitely see that perspective on how they look at the whole thing. But from an outsider looking in, it's like, okay, I understand all that shit happened. It really made no one want to really work with a lot of other people on the entire film ever again. But the film's so good. It's still a good film. Even though I feel like towards the third act, it kind of becomes like just a regular action film. Still the regular type of thing, the buddy action film stuff. I feel like there's maybe some point of special inspiration or imagination or a certain spark of like just a little something extra. I think there's just a little extra magic between Black and Scott that could have really gone forward if they really had the reins so much more I'm still fascinated about this film that never got made, that was originally written. It sounds fascinating. I'd love to see that version of The Last Boy Scout as well, but it does entirely make sense to have the entire film come back around to ending at the football stadium, because it's all about the sports gambling and all the fixing the games and all that type of stuff, all the stuff from Billy Cole up at the Milo and Shelly Marcone and the center kind of being exceptionally greedy and wanting more money to get paid off and bribed to legalize the gambling. It all makes sense to go and have it end at the stadium, because it's a fantastic sequence. It all comes off so goddamn well. It's like you can't tell that this thing was fucked up in a certain way. You can't tell that there was tensions on set and things not going right and creative differences, all this type of stuff, because it comes off as streamlined and slick as anything else that Tony Scott was doing. But just, you guys let me know what your perceptions are of The Last Boy Scout. Where has it landed for you over the time? And how do you feel about that original version where it was a lot bleaker in a certain way? Like, even though this film already has those tinges of bleakness in the characters and the tone and whatnot, getting something that was nastier and darker and just kind of grimier in a certain way, how would you think that would play? Would you think that would elicit more box office? I don't know. But it would definitely be a fascinating film to have actually seen as well alongside the final version we did get. So guys, thanks so much for watching. Hope you guys stick around and watch more stuff and interact on the channel with the comments and the likes and the shares around. And of course the Patreon to get a little bit something extra every month and help support the channel. So guys, thanks so much. Take care. Bye-bye.